Under the burning desert sun, a group of men rode hard across the dry land, dust rising behind their horses like smoke. Their shouts echoed across the canyon, sharp and cruel. In the middle of them, tied with rough rope and walking barefoot, was a young Apache woman named Nita. Her long black hair was tangled and her face was streaked with dust and tears. She had been accused of helping her tribe steal supplies from a nearby settlement, though no one had seen her do it. The settlers wanted someone to blame, and Nita was the easiest target. When they reached the old dried-up well outside the abandoned mining town, the leader of the group pointed at it and said coldly that it was a fitting place for her. The men laughed as they dragged her to the edge. She pleaded for mercy, her voice hoarse, but they didn't listen. They believed that leaving her there would teach her people a lesson. With one hard shove, they pushed her into the darkness. The last thing she saw was the blue sky shrinking above her before she hit the bottom and pain spread through her body. For a long while, Nita lay there in silence, listening to the sound of the wind above. The well was deep but not filled with water, only damp earth and broken stones. Her leg hurt badly and her hands shook as she tried to move. She cried out, her voice small and weak at first, then louder as fear set in. "Please," she shouted. "Is anyone there?" Her words echoed back, but no one answered. The world above her was quiet, except for the wind whispering through the grass. Hours passed. The light at the top of the well grew softer as the sun began to set. The cold started creeping in, and Nita hugged herself for warmth. She thought about her family, the mountains, the songs her mother used to sing, the stories told by the fire. She whispered those stories to herself now, trying to stay awake, afraid that if she slept she might never open her eyes again. Far away, a ranch hand named Daniel was returning home after a long day of work. He was a quiet man, the kind who kept to himself. People in the town called him strange because he lived alone on the edge of the desert, near the hills. He didn't talk much about his past, but those who knew him said he once served in the army and left after seeing too much death. That night, as he rode his horse down the old trail, he heard something faint carried by the wind. It sounded like crying, soft and desperate. Daniel stopped his horse and listened again. There it was, a voice weak but clear. He followed the sound, guiding his horse slowly until he reached the old well. He climbed down from the saddle and leaned over the edge. "Hello?" he called. The voice below answered, trembling with fear. "Please, help me." He could barely see her in the fading light, but he could hear the pain in her tone. Without thinking twice, Daniel ran back to his horse, grabbed a rope, and tied it to a sturdy beam nearby. "Hold on," he said as he lowered the rope into the darkness. "I'm coming down." The descent was rough. The stones were slippery and dust filled his lungs, but he didn't stop. When he reached the bottom, he saw Nita huddled against the wall, shivering and clutching her injured leg. Her eyes widened when she saw him, a stranger, not from her tribe. "It's all right," Daniel said gently. "You're safe now." He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She looked at him with confusion and distrust. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you help me?" He looked around at the broken stones, the marks of struggle, and then met her eyes. "Because no one else did," he said simply. It took great effort to lift her. She was light but weak, and he had to tie her carefully before climbing up again. The climb was slow, each pull of the rope heavy with her weight and his own. His muscles burned, but he didn't stop. When they finally reached the top, he pulled her out onto the dry earth and collapsed beside her, breathing hard. For a moment, they just lay there under the rising moon, both too tired to speak. After resting, Daniel carried her to his horse. He helped her mount, then climbed up behind her to steady her as they rode toward his small cabin. The journey was silent except for the sound of hooves against the hard ground. Nita leaned weakly against him, her eyes half closed. She could feel his heartbeat against her back, steady and strong. She didn't know who he was, but she felt safer than she had in days. When they reached the cabin, Daniel helped her inside and set her down near the fire. He gave her water and cleaned the cuts on her hands. She winced, but he worked carefully. The old cabin smelled of wood smoke and leather, and the firelight flickered across the walls. He handed her a blanket and said, "You'll be all right now. Rest." Nita tried to thank him, but her voice broke. "They left me there," she whispered. "They said I didn't deserve to live." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You didn't do anything to deserve that," he replied. She looked at him for a long time, searching for a reason in his calm eyes. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" she asked again. He hesitated before answering. "Because once I needed help too, and no one came." She watched the fire flicker and felt tears sting her eyes. There was something honest in his words, something that reached her heart. For the first time since she fell into that dark hole, she felt warmth, not just from the fire but from the presence of someone who cared. Outside, the desert night stretched wide and silent. Coyotes howled in the distance. Daniel stayed near the door, watching the horizon as if expecting trouble. He knew that helping her might bring danger. If the men who threw her into the well found out, they might come for him too. But he didn't care. His conscience was louder than his fear. As Nita drifted into uneasy sleep, Daniel added wood to the fire. He looked at her. The girl fate had dropped into his path and felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Maybe this was the reason he had survived all the battles and loneliness. Maybe he was meant to be here, to save this one soul from the darkness. When the night grew quiet, Nita opened her eyes slightly and whispered, "What is your name?" Daniel looked over and said softly, "Daniel Hayes." She repeated it slowly, as if memorizing it. "Thank you, Daniel." He gave a small nod. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." The firelight flickered across their faces, and for a moment it seemed as if the world outside had stopped. Two strangers from different worlds, an Apache woman who had been thrown away to die and a lonely man haunted by his past, had found each other in the most unlikely place. And though neither of them knew it yet, that one act of kindness would change both of their lives forever. Would you like me to continue with part 2, 1300 words next? It will cover how the men return, what happens when they find out Daniel helped her, and how their bond grows stronger in the face of danger. Morning light slipped through the cracks of the cabin wall, soft and golden. Nita opened her eyes slowly, feeling the warmth of the fire still burning low beside her. Her body ached, but her leg felt a little better after Daniel had wrapped it with clean cloth. She heard the sound of boots outside and turned her head carefully. Daniel was chopping wood, his movement steady and strong. The desert wind carried the smell of pine and smoke. For a long moment, she simply watched him in silence. No one had ever helped her like this before. Daniel came back inside, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're awake," he said with a faint smile. "How's the leg?" She tried to move it and winced slightly. "It hurts, but I can feel it," she said softly. "That's a good sign," he replied. He handed her a tin cup filled with warm broth and sat near the fire. "You should eat something. You need your strength." Nita hesitated. She still didn't fully trust him, not because of what he had done, but because of what she had been taught. Her people had always feared the settlers. They had taken land, food, and lives. But the man sitting before her didn't look like the others. His eyes held quiet sadness, not hate. Slowly, she took the cup and drank. As she ate, Daniel spoke. "I'll need to go into town today," he said. "Get more medicine for your leg." Nita's eyes widened in alarm. "You can't," she said quickly. "If they see you helping me, they'll hurt you too." Daniel leaned back against the wall, his jaw firm. "Let them try," he said simply. "I won't hide doing the right thing." She looked down at her hands, her voice trembling. "They'll never forgive you for saving me? To them, I'm not even human." Daniel's eyes softened. "Then they're blind," he said. "You're more human than any of them." Later that morning, Daniel saddled his horse and left her with water, food, and a pistol she didn't know how to use. "Lock the door," he said before riding away. Nita watched him disappear into the distance, her heart tightening with worry. She had seen enough cruelty to know what people were capable of. In town, Daniel kept his head down as he bought supplies from the general store. The storekeeper, a round man with a sharp gaze, watched him carefully. "You look tired, Hayes," the man said. "Been keeping busy?" Daniel nodded. "Just work," he replied simply. The man leaned on the counter. "You heard what happened to that Apache girl?" he said with a smirk. "They say she's gone now. Saves us trouble." Daniel's hand tightened around the money in his fist. He forced himself to stay calm. "Don't believe everything you hear," he said. The man laughed. "You sound like you care." Daniel didn't answer. He took his supplies and walked out, his steps slow but heavy with anger. On the ride back, Daniel felt eyes on him. A small group of men were watching from a distance, 3 of the same ones who had thrown Nita into the well. They recognized his horse and started whispering among themselves. By the time he reached his cabin, the sky had turned gray. He went inside and found Nita sitting by the fire, trying to braid her hair. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "You came back," she said. He set the supplies down. I said I would, he replied. You should stay off that leg for a while longer. She nodded, though her expression turned uneasy. You're in danger because of me, she said quietly. They won't forget what they did. Daniel poured water into a pot and began boiling it for tea. Then let them remember, he said. Maybe they'll learn something this time. As evening fell, dark clouds rolled across the desert. A storm was coming. Daniel checked the door and made sure the horse was sheltered. When he came back inside, Nita was staring out the small window, her voice low. In my tribe, we believe the spirits test the heart of a person by sending them pain, she said. You must have passed many tests. Daniel gave a tired smile. I don't know about that, he said. Maybe I just got lucky. The wind howled outside and thunder rumbled far away. They sat in silence for a long time, the fire flickering between them. Then faintly through the storm they heard horses. Daniel stood, his eyes narrowing. Stay inside, he said. He grabbed his rifle from the wall and stepped out onto the porch. 3 riders appeared through the rain. The leader dismounted and shouted, We know she's here, Hayes. You think you can hide her? Daniel didn't move. You've done enough, he said calmly. Go home. The man laughed harshly. You're siding with her? That's a bad choice. Nita could hear every word from inside. Her heart pounded as she limped toward the door, but Daniel's voice stopped her. Stay back, he said firmly. The men started to circle, their voices full of hate. You think she's worth dying for? One shouted. Daniel raised his rifle but didn't aim to kill. She's worth more than you'll ever understand, he said. For a moment, the rain fell in silence between them. Then one of the men pulled his weapon and fired into the air to scare him. The sound echoed across the desert. Daniel didn't flinch. He stepped forward and said, If you want to hurt her, you'll have to go through me first. His tone was calm, but there was strength behind every word. Something in his eyes made the men hesitate. They had seen that kind of look before, the kind soldiers wore after seeing too much. The leader spat on the ground. You'll regret this, he said before turning his horse. The others followed, disappearing into the storm. Daniel stood in the rain until they were gone, then went back inside, drenched but calm. Nita was waiting by the fire, her eyes wide. You could have been hurt, she said, voice shaking. He set the rifle down. So could you, he replied quietly. She looked at him for a long time, then said softly, Why do you care so much? You don't even know me. He sat near the fire, staring into the flames. Because someone once saved me when no one else would, he said. He told me that kindness is the only thing that keeps us human. I failed that lesson once. I won't fail it again. Her throat tightened as she listened. She reached out, placing her hand gently over his. Then maybe you've already passed your test, she whispered. Days turned into weeks. Nita's leg healed and color returned to her cheeks. She began helping around the cabin, cooking, cleaning, even laughing sometimes. Daniel taught her how to ride his horse and how to shoot a rifle for protection. She in turn taught him old Apache songs and stories her mother used to tell. The cabin that once echoed with silence now felt alive again. One evening, as the sun set behind the red cliffs, Nita stood outside watching the light fade. Daniel joined her, the wind tugging at his coat. You could go back to your people now, he said. You're strong again. She looked at the horizon, then back at him. And leave the only man who ever saw me as a person? She asked quietly. No, I'll stay. He didn't argue. They stood side by side as the sky turned gold, then purple. The desert that had once seemed endless and cruel now looked peaceful. Nita turned to him and smiled softly. When they threw me into that well, I thought it was the end, she said. But maybe it was just the beginning. Because that's where I found you. Daniel looked at her, his eyes reflecting the fire of the sunset. And maybe that's where I found myself again, he said. The wind swept gently across the sand, carrying away the last trace of the storm. In that quiet place, far from the cruelty of the world, an Apache woman and a broken man found something neither of them had believed in anymore: hope. Their story was never written in any book or told in any newspaper, but for those who passed by the old cabin years later and saw the smoke rising gently from its chimney, there was always a sense that something pure had survived there, born from darkness, kept alive by one simple act of mercy.